You think your city is boring, you think your partner is holding you back. You tell yourself that if you move somewhere new, find someone better, get a different job, your life will finally feel like something worth living. You pack your bags expecting a completely different version of yourself to greet you on the other side. But here is the question that should make you stop packing for a second. What if the scenery isn't the problem? What if the rot is inside your own mind, and you are carrying it in your suitcase to every new place you go? Today, we are looking at a story about a woman who burned her entire life down trying to escape herself. By the end of this video, you will stop running. You will finally face the mirror, my friend. So let's start with the first question. Why do we believe a new place or a new person will magically fix our internal emptiness? Gustave Flaubert wrote Madame Bovary in 1856. He was describing someone he saw everywhere around him, and if he were alive today, he would find her in approximately 40% of the content you scroll through every day. The woman who is always on the verge of a new beginning. The man who is always one decision away from the life that will finally feel real. The person who is chronically, persistently, completely convinced that the problem is external and the solution is just around the corner. Emma Bovary grows up reading romance novels, not as a hobby, as a map for life. She reads stories full of passionate, dramatic, overwhelming love, and she decides that this is what real living feels like. Intense, beautiful, consuming, the kind of love that makes you feel like a main character. And then she meets Charles Bovary. Charles is a doctor. He is kind. He works hard. He loves her genuinely, completely, without drama or conditions. He is reliable. He is good. He is also, by every measurable standard of romantic fiction, boring. He doesn't sweep her off her feet. He doesn't look at her like she is the answer to a question that's been haunting him for years. He looks at her the way a decent man looks at a woman he loves, which is steadily and warmly and without the theatrical intensity that Emma's novels promised her. Why do we mistake a quiet, stable, predictable life for a prison? Because we were sold a different product. Emma didn't decide Charles was boring on her own. She decided it by comparison to a standard that doesn't exist outside of books. Real love is not a constant state of overwhelming feeling. Real love is showing up on Tuesday when nothing special is happening. Real love is Charles, who is not glamorous, not poetic, not particularly exciting, but who is there. Emma doesn't see that. She sees the gap between what she has and what she was promised, and she decides the gap is Charles's fault. She is already unhappy, and then she goes to the ball. One night, a wealthy family invites them to a party at a beautiful estate called Vaubyessard, and Emma walks into a world she has only read about. The clothes, the food, the music, the effortless way these people carry their elegance like it costs them nothing. She dances, she feels seen in a way her quiet life never makes her feel. She is alive that night in a way she has not been alive in years. What happens when you taste a fleeting fantasy and let it ruin your actual reality? The party ends, they go home, and Emma carries that one night like a wound that won't close. She takes the memory of Vaubyessard and she uses it as a measuring stick against which her real life fails completely every single day. The silk dresses she doesn't have. The witty, beautiful people who are not in her living room. The feeling of being somewhere that matters, which she now knows exists somewhere in the world, which means her actual life is not a life she has to accept, but a prison she is somehow trapped in. Charles notices she seems unwell. He is genuinely worried about her. And he makes a decision that is so human and so misguided and so recognizable that it should make you wince. He decides a change of scenery will help. He arranges for them to move to a different town called Yonville. Here is the crazy part. Why does the thrill of a completely new beginning always expire so quickly? Yonville is new streets, new neighbors, new windows to look out of, new routines to hate. Emma arrives with the specific, sharp hope of someone who genuinely believes that the next chapter will be different. And for a moment, it is. Newness has its own energy. Everything is unexplored, which means nothing has disappointed her yet. The canvas is clean. Within weeks, it is exactly as boring as Tosti's. Because Emma brought Emma to Yonville. She brought her brain and her expectations and her fundamental inability to find peace in anything that isn't the fantasy the romance novels described. The problem moved with her in her luggage, packed neatly between the dresses and the books. Yonville didn't know this yet, but it would learn. How do we convince ourselves that consuming things and spending money will finally make us whole? Emma meets a merchant named Leroux. He is the kind of man who looks at someone's obvious unhappiness and sees a business opportunity. He offers her things on credit. Beautiful things, expensive things, things that carry the aesthetic of the life she imagined having. Curtains with a certain quality to them, dresses that cost more than Charles's monthly income, carpets that transform a room from ordinary to something that could, if you squint, pass for the kind of room people live in at Vaubyessard. She buys. She keeps buying. And here is the thing about buying things when you are unhappy. The moment the thing arrives, there is a brief, genuine lift. The dress is beautiful. The carpet looks exactly right. For an hour or a day or a week, there is the sensation of having improved your life in some measurable way. And then the sensation fades and you are in the same room with the same brain and the dress is just hanging in the wardrobe and the carpet is just on the floor and you need something new to feel the lift again. Emma keeps buying. The debt piles up in ways she either doesn't know or doesn't let herself know. Leroux keeps extending credit because Leroux understands exactly what she is doing and exactly where it ends. She is building a beautiful version of her prison to make the prison more bearable. She is not solving the problem, she is decorating it. And then Rodolphe appears. What happens when you project your impossible romantic expectations onto a real, flawed human being? Rodolphe is charming and handsome, and he treats courtship like a sport he is very good at. He sees Emma immediately. Not Emma the person, Emma the need. He sees someone who wants to feel something intense and dramatic, and he offers exactly that, because he has done it before and he knows how it works. He is romantic in the way romance novels are romantic, which is to say, he performs it very well without actually feeling it. Emma falls completely. This is the love she was promised. This is the intensity that Charles could never give her. The letters, the secret meetings, the feeling of being the main character in a story that matters. She is absolutely certain that this is real and that her whole previous life was simply the waiting room for this. She starts planning to run away with him. She tells him. She is breathless with the plan. He writes her a letter. It is a masterpiece of self-serving cowardice, dressed up in elegant language. He tells her he loves her too much to ruin her life. He is doing this for her. He is being noble. He leaves. He goes on with his comfortable existence without a second thought. Emma is devastated in a way that goes beyond heartbreak, because Rodolphe wasn't the escape she thought he was. He was another thing she bought on credit, and the bill has come due, and she is left with nothing. Why do we keep doubling down on our destructive choices instead of admitting we were wrong? Because admitting it means the problem was never Charles, never Tostes, never Yonville, never Rodolphe. It means the problem was the expectations she carried into every single situation, and the way those expectations made it impossible for anything real to measure up. And that admission is the hardest one available to a human being. It is so much easier to conclude that Rodolphe was the wrong man than to conclude that her entire framework for evaluating men is broken. She doesn't make that admission. She finds Leon. Leon is softer than Rodolphe, more genuinely attached to her, and Emma tries again. The affair feels familiar now, which it should, because it follows the same structure. Intensity, secrecy, the feeling of being fully alive, and then the creeping, terrible recognition that Leon is also a person with his own needs and limits and fears, that he is also not the story. That adultery, as it turns out, is just as predictable and boring as marriage when you do it long enough. Let's be honest, this is the moment in the book that Flaubert is most ruthless, because Emma has now tried all the external solutions. She tried the new town, she tried the spending, she tried the affairs, and every one of them followed the same arc. Initial excitement, brief feeling of aliveness, and then the flat gray recognition that she is still herself, still in her own head, still carrying the gap between what life is and what her imagination insists it should be. How do we ignore the massive damage we cause to the people who love us while we chase our own happiness. Charles has been here the whole time, working his steady, unglamorous work, genuinely loving this woman who is conducting secret affairs and accumulating crushing debt in his name. He trusts her. He doesn't suspect because it doesn't occur to him that the person he loves might be doing this. He is the kind of man who assumes good faith because he operates in good faith. Emma has been using that decency as cover for years. There is a daughter, Bertha. She is growing up in this household, watching her mother's restlessness from a child's proximity, probably understanding more than Emma gives her credit for, probably shaped by the particular sadness that fills a house where someone is chronically elsewhere, even when they are present. Emma barely thinks about either of them while she is in the middle of her escapes. They are part of the life she is trying to leave. Why is the realization that you are the problem the absolute hardest truth to accept? Because it removes the exit. If Charles is the problem, you can leave Charles. If the town is the problem, you can move. If the relationship is wrong, you can find a better one. Every external problem has an external solution, and the existence of the solution means you still have hope. But if the problem is inside your own mind, inside the way you process experience, inside the expectations you carry, and the gap they create with every reality you encounter, then there is nowhere to go. There is no new town that solves that. There is no new person. The debt reaches a point where it can no longer be ignored. Leroux presents the full accounting. The number is enormous. Emma goes to Rodolphe. She asks for money. He refuses, with a politeness so cold it is essentially a confirmation of everything she should have known about him. She goes to Leon. He can't help or won't. She goes to others. No one comes through. Think about it. She spent years accumulating this debt to fill the hole inside her, and now the bill is due, and the hole is still there. If you changed everything about your external life today, would you actually feel any different tomorrow? Emma's answer is in a small box of white powder, arsenic. She takes it, knowing what it is, choosing it as the final escape, the one door left that she can walk through. And the death it delivers is not the romantic, dramatic exit her imagination might have designed. It is agonizing. It is prolonged. It is the body refusing to cooperate with one more of Emma's visions of how things should go. Charles finds out about the affairs only after she dies. He reads the letters. He understands everything, and the understanding doesn't produce rage. It produces a grief so complete that it finishes him within a year. He dies not long after, having spent his final months wearing out the chair he sat in, holding his memories of her. Berthe ends up in a factory. The innocent child who had nothing to do with any of this, shaped by the wreckage left behind by a woman who was so busy trying to escape her life that she never really lived it. Here is what Flaubert is telling you, and he is telling you directly, without the romantic softening that Emma would have preferred. The feeling you have that your current life is insufficient, that happiness is available somewhere slightly different from where you are, that the right external change will unlock something currently locked inside you, that feeling is not information about your circumstances. It is information about your mind, and your mind is going with you everywhere. The new city will be boring within 3 months. Not because cities are boring, but because you are the one experiencing the city. The new relationship will eventually reveal itself as a relationship between two real, complicated, imperfect people rather than the fantasy you built around the early days. The new purchase will sit in the corner of the room, losing its power to make you feel anything within a week. Emma tried all of it. Every version of the external solution. And Flaubert followed her through every one of them without letting her off the hook, which is why the book was put on trial for being immoral when it was published. It wasn't immoral, it was honest. And honesty about the grass is greener syndrome is genuinely uncomfortable for anyone who is currently packing their bags. You are allowed to change cities. You are allowed to leave relationships that genuinely don't work. You are allowed to buy things and travel and try new things. But do it with your eyes open about what those changes can and cannot do. They can change your circumstances. They cannot change your brain. They cannot install a new relationship with contentment. They cannot reach into the gap between what life is and what you have decided it should be and close it for you. The gap closes from the inside. That is the work, Not glamorous, not dramatic, nothing like a romance novel, but it is the actual thing, the thing Emma never tried. Don't be Emma. Face the mirror. The person looking back is not the problem, but they are the place where the solution starts.